Alrighty, up next we have Matthea, and she's going to be talking about exploring Neanderthal fire-starting technologies.
We often think of fire as one of the most important tools available to us, something intrinsic to being human. We're so close to fire that we often forget the ingenuity it must have taken to tame it for the first time. Now imagine a time when the ability to start fire wasn't a given, when the resource of flame was available only by chance, by collecting it from wildfires. Now that might seem like a strange thought, that it was once easier to collect from the landscape than it was to make a fire on your own, but in fact we have a lot of examples of this throughout the world. So that means that at some point in our lineage, humans discovered the techniques for making fire at will. Now we want to know when this discovery occurred and whether our non-human contemporaries, Neanderthals, were in on the secret. Because if they weren't, this could be an important cofactor in their disappearance roughly 40,000 years ago. Now, Neanderthals were the first non-human hominins to be discovered. This means we have a long, complicated relationship with them. We often look at them as these slouching, hairy brutes with simple minds. But the more we learn about Neanderthals, the more we realize how similar we really are. But despite these similarities, archaeologists right now are debating whether or not Neanderthals were capable of starting fires. Now, this is an important question because it gets to the heart of who are we as humans, and why are we the last hominin standing? Now, I want to jump into this debate at the microscopic level. I'm going to be literally sifting through Neanderthal ashes of their fire remains from Oscarasciuto rock shelter in southern Italy, using high-resolution techniques to figure out if I can see any evidence of a fire-starting technique that could have been used by Neanderthals called strike-a-light. This is where a sharp, hard stone like flint is scraped rapidly across an iron-rich material like pyrite, creating tiny pieces of iron. These pieces then rapidly oxidize, creating a spark that can then be caught and nurtured into a roaring fire. At the same time, tiny pieces of the flint striker will also break off. Now, it's these microscopic fragments that I'll be looking for as I try to answer the question of whether Neanderthals at Oscarasciuto were creating fire. Now, if I'm successful, I can then bring my methods all over the world to answer the question of when and how these fire-starting techniques emerged. And this will give key insight into whether our relationship as humans with fire made the crucial difference between survival and extinction. On the other hand, I might find just more evidence that our Neanderthal cousins were just as clever as we are. Thank you.
Ernie, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Where else have these tiny particles of flint and pyrite been found?
Well, we really haven't looked at the microscopic footprint of fire-starting technologies. We've looked mainly at tools, the strike-a-lights themselves, trying to find evidence of that on the tools themselves. We haven't looked at the substrate, the actual soil. So what I'm going to do is do a sort of extraction technique to try to get these pieces out and quantify them that way. Yes?
So why, following on from John's question,
Sure.
Why that site in particular? What leads you to think that this is a good site to test?
Good question. Yeah, so Oscarasciuto is great for a couple of reasons. One, it's outside of the area that we've focused mostly on. So southwestern France is really where this question started of, were Neanderthals able to create fire? This is outside that zone, so it broadens that sort of source. As well as that, the layer that I'm looking at is right on top of a layer of tephra, which is like volcanic ash, which is very easily datable. So we know that's a 35,000-year-old layer. And so the layer that I'm looking at is right on top of that. Yeah?
So do you have an estimate on how well these micro-ashes particles preserve?
Good question. So one of the reasons that we're looking at this technique is because we get well-preserved particles. So on the one hand, the flint particles will preserve really well, and we know that because we have a lot of flint at the site, and it's a very hardy material. On the other hand, the pyrite particles are less likely to preserve just because of the diagenesis of that particular mineral. But we've also looked into that, and the products of the sort of breaking apart of pyrite are things like hematite and magnetite, so we'll also be looking for those. Yeah?
There are some crucial advantages that a fire-starting species would have over a non-fire-starting species.
Great question. So we use basically everything we use fire for today. Heat, cooking potentially, and protection. So if you were able to create fire, you wouldn't have to, obviously you wouldn't have to wait for a fire to be started on the landscape to collect from it. You could start it whenever you wanted. You could then start it in colder environments when there won't be fire on the landscape, which keeping warm in a colder environment obviously would give you a large advantage over an individual who couldn't keep warm. And in that case, you could also move to a colder environment and expand your boundaries. Thanks.
Alrighty, thank you so much.